Okay, welcome. Welcome to Satsang. Today the subject is going to be about living joyously, living in joy, living in fulfillment, living in the fullness of being. The question always arises is why very few people ever do. And since I've received a lot of questions regarding this, that's going to be the subject. Now, there are two aspects that most people are not aware of, why we don't live from our optimum self. And these two aspects, I'd like you to listen very carefully because they are the whole thing. One, all feelings come from being. You are a human being. All feelings come from being, and they're always love. Okay? I take a few pauses here because I want you to really feel what that means. Number two, the second aspect is that our human ego will always interfere with whatever comes through the being and translates it into guilt and fear. Now we're going to see, first of all, I'm going to quote some cases that I've had. I've been a hypnotherapist for over 30 years, so I've learned quite a bit. I'd like to tackle first the second part. Why is it that we are always translating it from the ego point? Okay. First of all, you are a human being. We all know that. But the one thing that most people forget is that in truth you are being playing the human role. In the same way the ocean is one ocean, but it has many waves on its surface, billions of them. They all seem to be different, separate, and unique, but they're all the same water. They're all the same one ocean. Well, it's the same with us. We are all one. But we think we are separate, we think we are unique and special. And it is that need to be special that brings the greatest unhappiness. One of the things I said once was that one of the greatest blocks I have found in doing hypnotherapy is that people feel that they have been abandoned in their life. About 90% of the people complain about being abandoned by their father, their mother, their parents, relationships or whatever. They feel that. And then I said that feeling abandoned is the hardest thing to make you realize who you are. But let me qualify that, because when I say that ipso facto, then people will feel discouraged. Everybody at some time or another has felt abandoned. I certainly have. The point is not whether you've experienced abandonment. The point is whether you still identify with it. You know, sometimes I've met counselors who still tell their story about being abandoned. And they use it, most people use their past as a badge. Why do we do that? Because we still want to identify with the human as a person. Because the greatest fear, the greatest human fear is the truth. Because in truth there is no person. There is only oneness appearing as you. That's quite a realization. I didn't realize that until after 27 years doing what I did. And it happened during a conflicted relationship. So those two aspects are very important. I had a client not so long ago, and he said that he was an alcoholic. He said, but he's been sober for a year. And I said, great, you're no longer an alcoholic. Now you can really learn who you are. And he said, yes, I'm a recovering alcoholic. We can't get away from this identification with who we think we are rather than who we really are. And that is the whole problem. That is the whole suffering. This is why most people carry this self-image. They're protecting, defending it. As Jola, the founder of psychosynthesis, said 95% of your energy is spent protecting, defending, and maintaining your self-image. And there isn't one. It's an image, imagination. Okay. Just a while ago, I had a man said to me, he said, Burt, I've got to talk to you about something. And I said, yes. He said, I received an incredible shock. And I said, what happened? He said, well, I went to a counselor, and she was quite psychic. She looked at me and she said that I have a lot of fear, that I have a lot of anger, and even hate. She said, when I heard that, I went into shock. And I didn't hear anything else that she said. See, what happens is that this ego, this human ego, is self-perpetuating. What it means is that the moment you begin to discover its games, you protect it even further. Okay? And we're going to see why as we go along. Okay? Because we're so afraid of not being somebody. But in truth, you are not anybody. You are everybody. Am I making myself clear here? In other words, you are the ocean itself. You are life itself. You are a divine, sacred being. But you're not a particular individual. You see? And when you begin to see yourself as a being playing the human role, that very understanding alone brings a great shift in your life. And that's when you begin to realize what true peace really is, what true understanding is. You see? Now we have to go into why we keep sabotaging ourselves because we think we are human, we're protecting the human all the time. Why the human ego is made up of guilt. Okay, why is it made up of guilt? Because you as a human being have forgotten the being in your everyday life, and you identify only with your past, with your self-image. So because of that, you keep trying to protect it and defend it, because this is who you think you are. But because you have forgotten you are a being, because you have forgotten that your true nature is love, and the human cannot love. The human absolutely cannot love. It is the being in you that loves. So therefore you crave love all the time. Look at anywhere, the internet, newspapers, everybody is seeking a relationship. Everybody wants somebody to love them, but you never say, I want somebody to love. I want somebody to love me first. You see? In other words, we know that our feeling is love. But what we do with that love is that we turn it from an ego point of view into guilt. How I wish I was loved. How I wish somebody would love me, make me feel good about myself. How I wish I would love myself more, type of thing. In other words, we cannot stop and say, I am love already. It's not something you're going to attain, it's not something you're going to get. You see, you already are it. And this is where we keep missing it. Why? Because you are a human being playing the human role. But because you don't know that, you keep feeling that something is missing. You keep feeling as if you're not good enough. Are you understanding me? And because you keep thinking something is missing and you're not good enough, you start seeking the being, but you don't do it through the world. If I had a lover, if I had this, if I had that, that doesn't mean there's anything wrong with any of that. But you use it in order to make yourself feel what you always want to feel in your heart, to be in love. You see, because your nature is love, but we don't know that. So we keep seeking outside to be what we already are, and of course it never happens. So I was telling you about this guy, right? Yeah. He received a shock. Did I tell you already about that? Okay. Yeah. And instead of congratulating himself and realizing, oh, so that's why I was depressed. Oh, that's why this is happening. Instead of feeling glad to be aware of what was holding him back, he went into shock. More guilt. Guilt is self-perpetuating. Okay? In other words, it keeps compounding more and more and more and more and more. It doesn't stop until we learn to forgive. Now, forgiveness is a misnomer. Forgiveness means for, F-O, and then you can put an E, for forward, giveness. You give it forth. Okay? So forgiveness is not something you do saying, I forgive you or I forgive myself. Forgiveness is seeing very clearly that there's absolutely nothing to forgive because you are a being, not a human. Whatever you've experienced in the past, you can totally forgive it and rise above it. And to that point, you start living joyfully and happily in fulfillment. Because your nature is already fulfillment. It's not something you're going to get after listening to Burt or reading a book or something like this, although that would help. What will happen is when you stop and say that what I am, what I prefer to be, what I hunger for is already in my heart, is already here. And then you claim it as your right. You see? And when you start doing that, that's the unfoldment. That's when you start moving into your true nature. Now, we'll talk a little bit more about forgiveness, because forgiveness is the whole thing. Forgiveness is seeing really that there's nothing to be forgiven because you are a being. Now, this is an email I got, but the reason I'm going to read it to you, simply because it represents hundreds of emails, similar emails I've received just in this month alone. I kid you not. It is so popular that you might even say after hearing it, of course I agree with him. Okay, but this is what he said, and we're going to understand why he said what he said. He said, Burt, you always focus on forgiveness. I understand the concept, but what if I hurt someone by saying something nasty to him and regret it? How then can I forgive myself? If I choose to let go as if nothing has happened and promise myself not to be nasty in the future, aren't I being selfish while the other is still suffering from what I said and did? It seems logical, doesn't it? It seems even noble, doesn't it? But there is no understanding of the dynamics of why he did what he did in the first place. You see, this is where we begin to understand, okay? So we go back. You are a human being, a being playing the human role. That is the fundamental truth. That is the truth of oneness. That is the whole thing right there. To the extent that we realize it, we find peace. Because we don't know that, because we don't live from the being and we live from the human ego all the time, thinking that we are just a person that is conditioned by its past, okay, we feel that whatever happened in the past and we have to forgive it, but we cannot forgive it because to us it's still real. But forgiveness is seeing that it is not real. It is a conditioned aspect of the mind. Yes, the experience has happened, but your viewpoint of it is entirely dictated and translated by your own egoic mind. Let me take it step by step here. And we go into this man. I told him that I'm going to have it on video. First step is this, okay, that he has hurt somebody. Why did he do that? Why was he nasty to somebody and then regretting it? We're going to see the vicious circle of the guilt. See, the reason why we do things as we do and react, because of two things that the guilt of the human ego has in us. Two aspects called denial and projection. Denial means this, that you really think you are your persona, you think you are the human ego, you've forgotten being. Okay? So therefore in everyday life you have an image of who you think you are. And you keep protecting this image every time someone says something that it kind of impinges on your self-image and you get hurt, you feel a little offended or withdrawn, you don't do anything about it. That's called denial. So you sweep it under the carpet. Okay? So next time something else happens, because you're self-conscious, remember, when you are self-conscious, when you are conscious of the fact that you're just a person, you feel attacked every day without even realizing it. Oh, the cashier didn't smile at me. Did I do something wrong? Or that person was nasty to me. Or they hung up on me while talking. I mean, this is continuous. This is going on all the time. That's called the human ego. So therefore we try to be diplomatic, we try to be nice, we try to forget it, sweeping under the carpet, sweeping under the carpet, called denial. And then it keeps building up, building up, building up. We don't even realize it's building up. One day you are with people and you have swept so much under the carpet that now there's a bulge and it's going to explode, right? So one day you are with people, they say something maybe innocently that really hurts you and you explode. The explosion is part of the nature of the human ego also, because when we explode in a way, we're trying to get rid of the pain. We want to take it out of our system, but because we have done that, then we feel ashamed that we have done that. We regret the fact that we have hurt somebody by exploding. And so we feel bad and we don't want to forgive ourselves for hurting somebody else. What's wrong with me? Why do I do this? More guilt. Self-perpetuating. More and more guilt. So guilt builds on guilt, builds on guilt, builds on guilt. There's only one way to transcend the guilt of the egoic mind and find your true nature. And that's called forgiveness. Okay? But I'm going to show you a few steps on doing forgiveness that is so beautiful. And when you do it every day, you begin to see changes in your life. I've had a lot of people on the internet, and thousands of people will be watching this, who write me every day saying how their life is changing, applying forgiveness in their life. Okay, but we're going to discuss that in a moment. Okay, what did I say before I said we'll go into the forgiveness part? What did I just say here? Okay. Let's tackle the first part. Remember the two aspects that I said in the beginning. It will come to me, doesn't matter. Okay, I just talk ad lib here. The two aspects that we started out with are this. One, all feelings, all of them, come from your being. Your being is love. You cannot do without love. Love is the only thing that gives meaning. Love is the only thing that brings fulfillment. Without love, there's nothing. In fact, love has been called God. Love has been called oneness. You see, because love is everything. That is your nature. All feelings come from love. Because you think you are an ego, you keep translating that love into a need for love. Suppose you fall in love with someone. At that moment you fall in love, you forget yourself, right? So your heart is full. And at that moment of fullness, you are realized being. You are in your being. But the next day you start dreaming about this lover, and then the guilt starts coming in. What if this is not real? What if I lose him or her? What if she or he doesn't love me as much as I do? What if something goes wrong? See what I mean? Immediately. That doubt, that guilt comes in automatically from the egoic part of us. Okay. Now, the truth of the matter is, if we begin to understand, is that every feeling that you feel comes from being. I'm going to pause here and wait for you to ask me a question. All feelings that you feel all come from love. Challenge it, please. All feelings that you feel come from love. You don't want to ask a question like, why do I feel sad? Why do I get depressed? Why do I get angry?
Yeah.
Why do we feel bad?
Why do we feel bad if they
Right.
all come from love?
Very good. Because the being is love itself. Okay? So the feeling of love is always there. But because we think we're not aware of the being, we think we lack something. This feeling of lack immediately translates that feeling of love into, how I wish I felt that love, how I wish I was that love. Are you understanding? Immediately there's the different translation or interpretation. Make the human translating the being. It shifts immediately. The moment you feel love, like in my youth when I was a young man, I suffered great feelings of abandonment. I felt great loneliness in my life. Okay, it's a long story, so I don't want to go into it, but I did feel that very strongly. But it was later, much later, many years later, where I realized that the loneliness I was feeling was an interpretation of oneness. Got it? I began to see in my loneliness how vast life is, and I am so small. Just like the man who looked at the stars in the beginning and he says, my God, how magnificent life is. The stars, everything, the cosmos, and I am so small. You see, he separated from the cosmos. I separated. And in that separation I felt my loneliness. But later on, many years later, I realized that the loneliness I experienced was my oneness. Was the oneness that I was. But it simply shifted from the being to the human. Are we getting it? It's all clear. If it isn't, please ask me. Okay? Your questions would also help people who watch these videos, because I cannot anticipate what you might be wanting to ask. Okay. So this is the dynamic that is happening all the time. Every time you are depressed, every time you are angry, every time you are frustrated, every time, it is nothing more than the human ego interfering with the feeling that you would like to have. If right now you were deeply depressed and I asked you sincerely, now how would you rather feel? And you say, I'd rather feel whole. I'd rather feel happy, right? Yeah, because it's your being. You see? But the point is, why are you still feeling sad? Because you are still feeling guilt over that love. You cannot, it's too good to be true. It can't be right. I am so far away from God. You see, like what love is, what the oneness is. See, we cannot see how grand we really are. We can't imagine how beautiful we really are. And so we rather think small and protect this idea of who we think we are and have some identity, even if it means being abandoned or being an alcoholic, rather than being just being. Because being itself is frightening to the human ego. Why is it frightening? Why is being so frightening to the ego?
Because the ego thinks it's going to die.
Very good. The ego thinks it's going to die when it realizes its true nature. But the truth is the ego will die when it realizes its true nature. But the death of the ego is the realization that nothing died. You never lost anything, you only gained. Are you understanding?
Well, does the ego eventually die?
Yes. Yes.
So like
The ego will eventually die. When the ego dies, we can say a person is fully enlightened.
Okay.
You see? But then again, what is enlightenment? Is realizing that no one is enlightened because there was no one to realize anything. There was only oneness. You see? Because the ego doesn't exist. It is a conditioned aspect of being human and forgetting the being. And that is the whole game of life.
So the ego doesn't exist?
No, of course not. It's all an illusion. It's all an illusion. The daily world that we see is a dream, really. But when you realize it's a dream and everything is just imagination, think of anything that has not been created by imagination. Can you think of anything that has not been created by mind? Everything is created by mind, but that's the beautiful thing. You see? Now, there are two kinds of minds I'm talking about. The individual mind, which is your conditioning, your aspect, your viewpoint, okay, your upbringing, your nationality, your religion, all that goes into your individual mind. And then there is mind, universal mind. And the universal mind, see, people think that the mind is inside them. No. The body is inside the mind. The mind is all that there is. I'm talking about the expansive mind, the beautiful, beautiful thing called mind. The world is the appearance of mind. When we, now what I'm talking about, this is not Burt talking here, okay? This is things that I have realized. And we all eventually realize it, that this is the truth. For 27 years I played teacher. I had my own television show in Toronto called Mind-Body Connection. I wrote a book called Be Aware, Be Free. It sold okay. And, but it wasn't until 27 years later, during a conflicted relationship, that I woke up and realized there's nothing to learn, there's nothing to know, there's nowhere to go, nothing to accomplish. Everything is now. Eternally. Is there an exit to now?
No.
Now is always. Your body changes because it gets recycled. My body has recycled at least 4 or 5 times in this lifetime already. But I am the watcher, experiencer of this, because I am pure awareness. You see? So understanding this dynamic of who you are brings you the fullness of being. The fullness of being eradicates the ego. And that fullness of being is the peace. Truly, that nothing can compare to it. Once you have that peace, you never worry again or get frightened. Yeah.
And the peace is by forgiving, keep on
Yes,
forgiving.
let's just talk about forgiveness now, okay? How it works. Okay, now there are 3 steps that you can start doing as soon as you leave here. As a matter of fact, you can do it while you are here. Okay, there's one thing that the mind does all the time. It's always judging. Judging, 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 concluding, reaching conclusions, making up its mind. See, last satsang I had a man here, and his name is Namjel, Jerry. And as we were exploring, I said, do we reach any conclusions? And is the conclusion valid of what we conclude? And he said no, and he went really into it. He was brilliant, absolutely brilliant. I just, at that moment, I was in love with him. and as he kept exploring it, he said, yeah, the reason why we want to conclude, the reason why we want to make up our mind, because we want something to give us safety, something to give us security. We're hanging on to something that will make us feel okay. You see, and it was brilliant. And I know that he said it from his own heart, not by reading it. You see? So this is it. Every time you make a judgment, good or bad, it can never be real. Why? Because life is without limitation. I'm talking about the truth, okay? I'm not talking about the ideas that we have. See, every time you make up your mind, this is the way it is. You have locked. This is what many religions do. Not the founders of the religion, who are beautiful people. The followers, usually, they make up, oh, this is the way it is. And they place rules and conditions, and before we know it, we have wars. You see? The beautiful thing about human being, the being itself, is that it's infinite. Every time you make up your mind, you've locked yourself into a limitation. Do you know what I mean when I say limitation? It means right now there is no way to go anymore. You've made up your mind. You're locked. There's nowhere to go. You see?
So you're not open enough.
You're not open
you're
enough
not open
to
enough
see
to
there's more and more.
Yeah.
Right. So the first step towards forgiveness, okay, this is the first step, we're still talking about it, is this. Every time you make a judgment, you allow it. And just be aware and say, thank you for making me aware that I made a judgment. Do not judge yourself for judging, because then it's a vicious circle, isn't it? We'll go back to perpetuating guilt. Okay, so how many judgments do we make every day?
Millions. Thousands?
No, I'm laughing because you're right. We're making a judgment all the time because our mind is based on conditioning and it's making up its mind all the time. I remember one time, a few years ago, I was feeling really good. I feel good most of the time. And so I was walking down the street and the guy acted what I judged him as being obnoxious. In my mind I said, oh, he's being obnoxious. The moment I said that, I became aware of the reaction in my body. And the joy that I was feeling was gone. It's simple. That gave me my first big lesson. See, the judgments we make all the time are affecting our health. Physical, mental, emotional and spiritual. But we're not aware of it. So right now what I'm asking you to do to learn what forgiveness really is be aware of the judgments that you make all the time. You're making them all the time, every point. Even now as you hear me talk, you're making judgments. Good or bad, it doesn't matter. They are all limitations. You see? So the moment you see it for what it is, you're flexible, you're fluid. You know you are a fluid being. Never become static. You see, because the moment you make a judgment, you're static. You can't move. You're choking. So you keep it fluid. Become aware that you made a judgment and just let it go at that. And then you become aware slowly how it's been affecting you energy-wise in your body. 3 is the most difficult part of all. The third part is the most difficult of all, the forgiveness. And you know what it is? What is the third one?
Can't think of it.
Do nothing.
Oh yeah.
Do absolutely...
I should know that. I said that last time.
That's okay. So, the third one is do nothing. Now you might say, what do you mean do nothing? You see, the moment we make a judgment, and we become aware that we made a judgment, we judge it by saying, I shouldn't have judged. Got it? So doing nothing means that subtle awareness where you let it be as it is without moving it, or without making it wrong, without even wishing to change it. Just be aware. That's it. Totally detached, unbiased awareness. That's it. Don't change it. You also become aware, then you start becoming aware how it's affecting your energy moment to moment. You know, sometimes people get up in the morning feeling lousy and they can't figure it out. They go to a doctor as if he can tell them. You know, we're burning up energy by the slightest derogatory thought. We don't even realize that. So the doctor gives you an aspirin or gives you some drug. It might help for the moment to relax you, but it doesn't give you awareness, does it? So what I'm saying, and I'm not saying against doctors here, okay, don't get me wrong here. What I'm saying is that awareness will bring you knowledge you never even dream of. So whenever you make a judgment, be aware that you made a judgment. And be thankful that you became aware of it. And do nothing about it. That part, doing nothing, the Course in Miracles says you need do nothing. Are you anybody familiar with Course in Miracles? Oh, beautiful, beautiful. Okay, so when you allow yourself to do nothing, absolutely nothing, you're open, you're fluid, you're moving, you're pliable, you're watery, you're liquid. You see, that's what liquid is, flowing. In other words, you see, there's no wrong or right, and you begin to feel a self-confidence. You begin to feel your self-consciousness will start to drop away, you know. So this is why I wrote a book called Hiding from Plain Sight, Hiding in Plain Sight. When I wrote that book, I wrote it for the people who, you know, for people asking similar questions that we did today. And when I wrote it to send it as PDF, and I sent it out several people. And they started saying, "Wow, this is doing this, it's making things clearer, blah, blah, blah." So then a publisher got wind of it, and she fell in love with the book, the publisher, and it's published. So anyway, that's the book I'm talking about. It's on the table. So the reason it became popular, it is because everybody knows that they are a human being. Everybody knows somehow that they feel there's something lacking, but inside, when you are very still, when you're very silent, because all knowledge is not words. It is the silence in the heart. That's a true knowledge, you see. The realization is that there's nothing for you to learn, but to open your heart to what is in the moment. And when you open your heart to what is in the moment, which means being fluid, being liquid, that will bring you everything that you need. You see? That in itself. Why? Because the greatest teacher is you, to yourself. In other words, you see?